pleasure to introduce Anish. Anish this summer worked extremely hard on his LED robot. And if there was one word I could use to describe Anish, it would definitely be self-driven. I would always kind of come up to Anish during class and say, like, oh, like, what do you need help with? You know, is there anything like that's tripping you up? And he'd say, no, I'm going to figure it out. And that really kind of stuck with me there because I love easy answers. But you know, he's different from me, and he wanted to figure out everything on his own, kind of using resources at his own fingertips. I never had to ask him to do his notebook, and I can tell from experience, having checked his notebook, that he has definitely learned a lot in this program. So without further ado, I'm going to give it up for Anish, but you guys can all.
Hello, my name is Anish, and this summer at BlueStem I've made the remote-controlled LED robot. And I made this project because, I'm interested in robotics, and because I actually wanted to do something with Arduino, which is basically acts as the brain of the robot, and it helps it make certain decisions, as you'll see. So for my base project, I worked on the follow your hand section, which basically utilizes an ultrasonic module to allow the car to move forward, and 2 obstacle avoidance modules to allow the robot to move left and right. So when I plug in the power source for the Arduino and I power up for the batteries, you'll notice that it's already starting to spin, and if I put my hand over here, you'll notice that it's actually starting to follow it a little bit. And then if I put my hand, for example, in this direction, it's starting to follow it. Similarly, if I put my hand, for example, out here, it would start to follow it. However, if I put it too far out, it would actually not be able to follow it, or too close. It needs the right distance in order to follow it. And then after completing this project, I worked on my modifications, which included adding a remote control, and it was programmed with some LEDs, which I'm going to show you now. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the speed of the motors once. So you can see that this LED is lighting up, and that's dependent on the speed of the motors. And now let's say that I press forward. This LED starts to light up, and that's signal that's set from the code. And then the same kind of works with, for example, right, left, back, and I can obviously get also 2 LEDs to light up, so back left can light up, so the yellow and white LEDs, and then I can also get back right to move. So these LEDs are positioned in a way where the red one is more forward, and the yellow one is, the white one is more towards the back, so you can kind of see how the robot's movement is going to be. And then I also added some movement with my motors that I'm going to show you now. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did earlier, which is increasing the speed. And then if I press, for example, a button here, it should obviously light up this LED and move the car forward, left, right, and then I can also get it to, for example, to move back to the left, and I can also get it to actually move back to the right. So throughout my summer at BlueStem, I was able to understand the different components that were made up of in my project. So for my base project, I used 2 obstacle avoidance modules, which basically send out an infrared signal, and then it sends back a signal to the Arduino that determines which direction it's going to move it in. And then for the ultrasonic sensor, it sends out a sound wave, and then, for example, if my hand is there, it's going to be able to detect the distance using the time that it thinks it will take for the sound wave to reach my hand. It will see, okay, should I move forward or should I not? And then I also learned a lot about how this remote works with the IR remote. It actually uses an LED signal, so it uses this LED over here, and it works similarly to the obstacle avoidance modules in the sense that it uses like an infrared light to light it up. So when I plugged it in, you might have noticed that this component over here would actually light up, and that's to kind of connect everything related to the remote control. And then I added some LEDs which would program to different circumstances depending on what button was pressed. Throughout my summer at Bluestem, I also faced a lot of challenges, such as my obstacle avoidance modules were not really working because of the unreliable LED signal that would be sent back. So I actually had to replace it. I learned a lot about parts replacement and when to replace my parts, and through these two sensors. And with the Arduino board, I actually had an Arduino Uno, which you can think of as like a smaller brain of this one. And this is the Arduino Mega. I had to switch in order to allow for these LEDs to gain more connections along this side over here. That way it would be able to fully get enough power, and this Arduino was also a little bit better for my connections. So overall, I think I've had a very meaningful summer at Bluestem. I think I've met a lot of people who have similar interests than me, and I've also been able to see how what I program can actually relate to, for example, what I'm actually making over here. And I think that connection for me is very interesting to see. So now I'm going to open it up to any questions that you might have about my project. Thank you for Yes.
Are there any other like mechanical modifications you thought of adding, like maybe a robotic arm or something like that?
So I haven't thought of like adding like a robotic arm like you said, but I have thought about maybe the two codes that I had. I thought about maybe integrating them a little bit more so that it could kind of work more smoothly, and I could show my demonstration maybe in just one code. Yes?
For the lights to turn on, is it after it receives a remote signal, or is it going off when the wheels are turning, or what's the logic between the remote, the lights, and the motors?
So I have after adding the LEDs, I had to have two separate power sources. For the motors, I need to have one separate power source, and then the remote uses like basically like an infrared signal that's done to the remote, and then it connects basically over to the Arduino through the breadboard, and then is basically able to give the power to the motors to finally run to you. Yes.
What was your favorite part of doing that project?
I feel like that, like adding my own modifications, because I was able to be maybe a little bit more creative and think more outside the box, is something that and maybe like, think about like, how is this unique to like my own project. Any other questions? Yes?
Once you integrate the code, I guess maybe like a mode switcher, I guess, is there anything else you hope to add to the car?
Well, I mean, maybe I would also like to add maybe more LEDs and maybe make it more user-friendly. So, because I have like a plus and minus sign basically, and you're like kind of increasing the speed without knowing what the speed actually is. So maybe more user awareness about what the speed